Candidates running for DC mayor clashed on a number of issues during our Ward 7 Democratic primary mayoral debate right here on WUSA 9 last night. And tonight we're breaking down what stood out and how this debate could impact the election. And joining us now is University of Maryland political science professor Dr. Breanna Gray. Dr. Gray, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, just right out of the gate, I'm curious, what was your overall impression of how the candidates performed? Do you think anyone gained ground here?
I do. I think that both candidates presented clear vision or what they believe to be a vision for the future of the city. And I think they did it so in a way that residents may have really resonated. I do believe that Kenyon McDuffie is really the establishment candidate. I think he has a lot of history in the city. I think based on his conversation last night, he talked about how he was one of 4 generations of McDuffies in the city. And so I do believe that people are more familiar with his name, but I do believe that Janice Lewis-George really came out the gate running. And I believe that she presented some very detailed plans about crime, about housing, about affordability of the city and how to attract more people to the city and more investors to invest in the city.
Well, let's start there. Housing. We had a direct clash on housing, one candidate calling the other plan unrealistic, while the other says the city needs to be more ambitious. Let's take a listen together to the candidates here.
Everybody should be able to live in the District of Columbia, whether you own and operate the business or you work at the front desk. And that's what our plan is designed to do. The Washington Post knows that our plan is realistic. The Washington Post actually called my opponent's plan unrealistic.
My plan calls for us to build more housing, to build better housing, and to build more near transit centers as well. The problem with my opponent's plan is it's not ambitious enough. It doesn't meet the moment. It doesn't meet the crisis. And we need a leader who's ready to do that.
A clear message from both candidates. What did you think of how the candidates handled that topic?
I think it's challenging. I mean, the numbers are there. It's very costly to build in the city. There is a lot of red tape in building in the city. And I think, based on some of the statistics that were provided, including that $60 million have been given to the city by the outgoing president, Joseph Robinette Biden, and, using some of those funds to really elevate some of the most struggling communities would be useful. So talking about, some of the monies that are in our repository of funds to be able to use is very useful. I do think that, ambition is obviously something that politicians across the board may have and may use to sort of attract voters and to attract additional resources. But I think, the conversation about reality was, throughout the entire conversation last night. I think there were many times where a candidate would say, this is something that is very unrealistic. And oftentimes we saw that coming from candidate McDuffie, who has had a lot of experience on the council and a lot of experience in working in government, period. And so I think he knows a lot of the challenges that exist with trying to build certain programs and certain possibilities in the city. But I think it is important to have that sort of optimistic view about what can happen.
Yeah, and in terms of public safety, there is a fierce debate on youth curfews right now among residents, and we saw that play out on the stage yesterday between our two candidates. They are very split on this issue. Let's listen to what they had to say here.
Doing nothing allows hundreds of kids to descend on areas like the Navy Yard, where they risk their own safety and they put others at risk as well.
Using these tools, when we have ICE in our city, when we have federal law enforcement troops in our city, we are creating a very real risk of harm and to our Black youth in this city and to all of our families in this city.
Your thoughts, Dr. Gray?
Yeah, so candidate McDuffie talked a lot about not just about, youth curfews, but also generally our investment in police presence and how community policing can lead to better outcomes, not just for youth, but for various wards across the city. I think that Janice Lewis-George made it clear that she wanted to invest specifically in youth. Bringing about certain opportunities through learning centers, through after-school programs, through community policing, and making sure that youth have alternatives to hanging out in neighborhoods like Navy Yard or H Street, because they have a vested interest in some of the spaces that we've curated specifically for them. So I do think they have a very different approach to this, but I do think that there are carryovers from each plan that may be useful in the future.
They also took shots at each other over campaign donations, even bringing up outside and political donor influence. What should voters watch for coming out of that discussion?
I think it's important to follow the dollars that we're actually seeing go to candidates. So Janice Lewis George talked a lot about individual DC resident donations. We didn't hear the same conversation from Kenyon McDuffie. I think it's important to also follow who are the donors that are providing funds to these candidates. We've seen that both of them have accepted donations from what we would call bigger entities, so not just an individual donor. And so I think there are our candidates on both sides who've accepted funds that don't necessarily represent a DC resident, an average DC resident, but I think the stats tend to show that Janice Lewis George is very much associated with individual, she even mentioned it last night, $5 donations from residents. I think we should also follow the endorsements, where candidates are being endorsed and who they're being endorsed by. Janice Lewis George talked a lot about being endorsed by unions. Kenyon McDuffie, spoke very much about, experience, and how experience is really a good predictor or a good indicator of potential outcome for, carrying out certain policies. And so I think residents are looking at, maybe looking at this different ways. I think we should follow the dollars, follow the endorsements, and that can give us a better indicator of which candidates, what their sort of premises and what their platforms are.
Great insight. Thank you so much. We're speaking with University of Maryland political science professor Dr. Breanna Gray. Hopefully, Dr. Gray, we've provided a little more clarity for DC residents ahead of this important election, especially when it comes to those undecided voters. Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, if you missed last night's debate or want to watch it again, you can stream it anytime on WUSA 9 Plus and on our website, WUSA9.com.